Well, greetings. I hope everyone can hear me. I trust you can. My name is Tracy Ferdine. I'm the director of the Center for Global Environmental Education, and we are celebrating our 30th anniversary, 30 years of being at Hamline University. And we've always wanted to pull together an event where our educators and supporters can follow throughout the year our work on rivers and our education on rivers. So we are so thrilled to be kicking off tonight the first webinar that we've ever done. So we trust it's going to go as smooth as possible. And we are so excited to be here. So you're joining us for the Waters to the Sea stories. And we thought about how should we talk about this? How should we move forward? And we realized much of what we do at the center is engaging in storytelling, a sense of place, and bringing it to life. And we couldn't be happier to working with our friends to pull together the Dakota place and kinship with the river. John Shepard will fill you in a bit more about our presenters, but I wanted to do a few thank you of the folks that were putting together this event tonight. Sarah Robertson is our coordinator of our Rivers Institute and has been working with us for a long time with this. And Coralyn Preston is new to us this year and has some experience working with the Monarch Project with these types of webinars. So it's a joy to have her on board as well. So these two have put a lot of work behind the scenes and working really hard to make this be smooth. And they will be here kind of managing the program as we're going through and making things happen. So they will be guiding us as we do our questions. And we have a series tonight where we're going to, we've been fortunate enough to create some videos and to have the featured speakers of those videos be actually taking questions and answering that. John Shepard will be kind of the master of ceremonies as we go through tonight. And will also was the video work behind the videos that we created, the editor of that. So just a couple of housekeeping things. We are trying to use the Q&A function in the Zoom. So if you do have a question, please use that. We are going to be using the chat as well, but try to keep your questions into the Q&A function. These questions will be collected throughout the webinar, and then we're going to do kind of two sessions. One where after we have our presenters have talked story and shared some of their experiences and we watch the videos, we will take questions from those folks. And then John Shepard will be sharing a bit with you about our Waters to the Sea, and then we'll be taking some questions about how we're using this in the classroom and how this can be used for educators around the country. So with that, oh, and of course, Sarah and Cora will be working their magic, monitoring, making sure everything is going smoothly. And we are recording this webinar, and we will be able to send that out to folks if you want to see it again, if it's so fantastic you can't miss it, or if you want to share it with somebody. So with that, I think I will turn this over to John Shepard, and he will guide us through. Thank you, John.
All right, thanks, Tracy. And welcome everybody. It's really amazing. We had no idea what kind of response we would get, and by all we can tell, there are a lot of you out there. We're just very glad to have you with us for this very special event. And I think it's going to be particularly special because of our guests who are with us tonight. So I'm going to introduce them to you. You can see their video feed is visible there, hopefully. Maggie, if you want to wave, Maggie Lorenz is the executive director of the Lower Phelan Creek Project, and it's Wakan TV Center. She's an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe and also descends from Spirit Lake Dakota Nation. She brings a professional background in education from both K-12 and post-secondary settings. Spends her free time with her family and enjoys being outdoors. She loves hiking and exploring new trails and parks in the Twin Cities. Maggie earned her BA in psychology from Metropolitan State University in 2010. So Maggie's going to be sharing stories and perspectives about our subject matter, about the Wakan TV Center, about places of importance in the Twin Cities region. So really glad to have you here. Thanks for being with us, Maggie. And our second guest is Dr. Kate Bean. Kate is a board member with the Lower Phelan Creek Project in St. Paul and its Wakan TV Center. She is a member of the Flandreau Santee Sioux Tribe of South Dakota, and her day job is as Director of Native American Initiatives with the Minnesota Historical Society. She holds a PhD in American Studies from the University of Minnesota. So Kate, glad you could be with us. Very excited to hear what stories you have to tell. And I'm going to say just a few more words about, before we jump into the kind of the heart of the program. So, you know, tonight we are meeting together in the ether of the internet. And we have the privilege of learning about some vital landscapes and waterways that couldn't be more real from these two people, Kate and Maggie, who possess special knowledge and awareness. As Kate puts it, the rivers and streams that flow across the land are the veins of the earth. My guess is that most people who live in the Twin Cities, which are dissected by the main artery of the Mississippi, don't think that way about the river, America's greatest river. As I was growing up here, for the most part, the Mississippi was a backdrop, something I caught glimpses of occasionally while crossing a bridge. Through years of experience, my appreciation has definitely grown, but spending time with Kate and Maggie in locations that have been and are still today sacred places in the heart of the Dakota ancestral homeland has begun to reveal to me how little I know and how much there is to learn. So Maggie and Kate, Pita Maya, thank you for being with us and for sharing your stories. We are honored by the opportunity to learn from you and to work toward deepening our understanding of the lands and waters that sustain us all. So with those words of introduction, I want to jump right into our first story. We made a couple of short videos that I would like to share with you. The first one is one we filmed with Kate.
Anywhere you go in this country, you're going to see the riverways are pathways for people, and they have been. They've always been ways where we have come together, and they've been sort of like these connecting sites for us. And so even before European arrival, Native people saw the riverways in that way and interacted with the riverways as trade routes and as a mapping tool. And so they connect all of these spaces and all of these different places. The water, the riverways, those are sort of the veins of the earth. That's what connects us. And so water, or mani, is really sacred to our people. It's our first medicine. It is required for all living things. When I look at the landscape in the Twin Cities, I always picture what it looked like without people. I think about the land itself. I think about taking away all the buildings, all the development, all the roads, and I try and imagine what it used to be and how it used to sound, and try and visualize the way that it looked for our grandparents. Which we learn from in learning the place names. The Dakota place names describe those visuals, because our language is really visual. There are a lot of place names. We have the Bedote area, which is sort of where the two rivers come together, the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers. Within the Bedote area, we have what we call Wita Tonka, or the Big Island, which today people call Pike Island. You know, a lot of these places have been renamed after white men. And that area is where we came out of the earth. And, you know, we came from the stars, and we're called the Wichachbioyate, or the Star Nation. And we came out of the earth at that place where the rivers come together. And I think that's one of the reasons why we hold water so sacred. Within these areas, there are so many stories within the waterways that connect all of these areas. There are so many different stories that connect us to the land, that connect us to what is underneath the land and the water within the land. And I think when you walk around these spaces and start to remember what we used to do in these locations, there was a purpose for everything. And there were teachings within all of these places. And if you look for those today, you can still find them.
All right. So with that, I want to give Kate an opportunity to share some further thoughts and reflections for about 5 minutes. Whatever comes to mind for you, Kate, that you'd like us to think about. And then just as a little preview, we have another little video featuring Maggie, and we'll hear a little bit from Maggie, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers with both Maggie and Kate. So Kate, please.
Hello, my relatives. My name is Kate Bean. I'm also known as Brings Them Home Woman. And thank you so much for having us here today and for making these lovely videos. You know, it was definitely a great experience to go out there and meet you all out there. It was a bit magical when the snow started coming down, right when we were speaking about the magic of these places. And I think, you know, these spaces that we're talking about are very complex. They are multi-storied places that not everyone sees or knows. And I think that that's what's really imperative that we understand, is that we really need to focus on remembering. We need to focus on remembering our stories, our connections, to stop thinking about our connections to these places as something that was done in the past, you know, for ourselves and for others who don't understand us as Native people, to understand that we still come to these places, we still pray at these sites, we still have things that we do here, we still harvest and forage for foods and medicines. And these are still, you know, our relationships with these spaces are very active and have always been. Even though as Dakota people, a large number of our people were removed from the state of Minnesota after the 1862 war. My family was removed, we were imprisoned. That's why my tribe is in South Dakota, but this is our home. And, you know, I come from Black Dogs Village, which is in current day Eagan, Minnesota, as well as Beremakaska from the Heato Tume community, or the village to the side community there, which is one of the largest lakes in Minneapolis. And so my family, our roots are here, even if our tribe isn't here anymore. And that connection has never been broken. You know, I think that something that was really important for me to understand growing up as somebody who was raised in cities all over the country, was separated from my tribal homelands, there was a real feeling of disconnect. And it wasn't until I moved home and really understood the history of my family's connections here, and also started understanding our language and the connections with our language with these places, the place names, understanding the visuals of how we describe places, that I really began to understand my own story, my family story in a whole new light. And my connection with the land was deeper. And what we found is that as we educate with people about these spaces, their connections with these places become deeper too. And so focusing on these places as Dakota places, as Dakota spaces, is so incredibly important. It doesn't mean that nobody else can be at these spaces. It means that it's another worldview of looking at these spaces that's much older than what we see today. And so it's really about remembering Places like Pike Island, we call it Witatonka. And we still use these names today in our communities. And so reclamation of names is incredibly important. Acknowledgement of Dakota names for these spaces is incredibly important. These names tell us stories about these places. Understanding our language and the way that we describe the world around us is incredibly important. When I go down to Fort Snelling, which is what they call the Badote area now it's named after a military fort where our people were actually imprisoned. But we call it Badote, this larger area. And it's such a significant place for us. And when you go down there in the winter, you can hear the trees popping. And in December, we have Chankapopoi moon, which is the December month, and so when we learn about our months, when we learn about our language and what our ancestors and our grandparents and great-grandparents called different times of the year, called different places, we start to see the world in a different way. And we realize that it's still that way. You can still hear that. You can still go there. You can still see. I've traveled down to the Badote area with some archaeologists within the work that I do, and there are still spaces down there that are as they were. And I think it's so incredibly important for us to see the world in that way in order for us to understand ourselves and our own connection and who we are. And for us as Native people, as Dakota people, this larger area is so significant. It is so important. It is one of the most important places to us, and the larger Badote area and all these sites within that larger area. And we struggle with having a connection to these spaces because some of our family members were removed, because this is that all of that area around there is owned by so many and managed by so many different entities that oftentimes we aren't spoken to when decisions are getting made about these spaces. And so a lot of the work that I do and a lot of what I focused on is acknowledgement of Dakota stories in public spaces and of Dakota participation in the decision making in these spaces, because in order for these spaces to remain healthy, we have to keep that connection strong. So Pita Maya.
Oh, thank you, Kate. That was wonderful. And we will look forward to coming back to you and exploring some of what you were talking about in greater depth in a moment here. So I'm going to now share a second story. This is a story that takes us a little deeper to a particular place, to Wakan TV.
Native people, Dakota people, were here for hundreds and hundreds of years before anybody else that's here now. And so we have a long, long history of knowing the land here, the plants and the animals, and how to relate and live in this particular environment, in this particular place. Hamitakuyepi. Maggie Lorenz Makiapie, Pabaksa Wiamie. My name is Maggie Lorenz. I am Pabaksa Dakota, and my name is Cuthead Woman in the Dakota language. The site that we're at right now is in what is known as Indian Mounds Regional Park in St. Paul, Minnesota. But to Dakota people, this is known as our Dakota Burial Mound site, connected to Wakan TV, which is below the bluffs where we're standing, nearer to the river, and that's a sacred cave site. This place today for Dakota people is a place where we can reconnect, I think, to our ancestors and to our history here in Minnesota that extends hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years that our people have been here. And so the burial mounds that are behind me are thousands of years old. We know from our oral history and storytelling in our community, and also from things that were written by some of the early white people who visited this place, that this is a really significant and sacred place. A lot of ceremonies happen here, and that Dakota people from all around, from hundreds of miles around, would bring their family members who had passed on to have them buried here. And I think that just speaks to how sacred this site is for people to make such a long journey with their passed on relatives to have them laid to rest here at what is now Mounds Park. Sites like Wakan TV are sacred not just for Dakota people, but for all people. One of the things that we learned in those many hundreds and hundreds of years is what places have a lot of power, power that can heal people, and those are our sacred sites. And the thing with Dakota people is we're not a selfish people. We want to share good things with everybody that wants to be part of those good things. And so I think that it's really important to take care of these sites because they're not just here for Native people, but they're really important and powerful places for all people.
All right, well, thank you again, both of you, for participating with us in enabling us to tell those stories. Maggie, would you say a few words?
Sure. First, I want to say Pidamayaye to John and Tracy and everybody at Hamlin and the Center for Global Environmental Education for reaching out to us at Wakan TV Center to ignite this partnership. It's been a really fun, initial project doing these couple of videos, and I'm looking forward to all the ways that we can work together in the future. And I want to say thanks to everybody for joining this presentation tonight to learn about these sites and our community as Dakota people. So as I said in the video, my name is Maggie Lorenz. I'm the Executive Director for Lower Phelan Creek Project and the Wakan TV Center. I'm Pabaksa Dakota from Spirit Lake and also Pembina Anishinaabe enrolled at Turtle Mountain in North Dakota. And I'm just really honored to be doing this work that is just incredibly important. In my intro, they mentioned that I have a background in education. So I've worked in higher education and also K-12 education settings, working specifically with American Indian student populations. For me, education was a really critical turning point in my life and opening doors for me to make a better life for myself and my family. So I really wanted to dedicate some time after I graduated to give back to Native students all that support that was given to me through my educational journey. Programs like positions that are specific for American Indian communities are so important. So I did that for about 10 years and I really got a lot of joy out of that. And but after about 10 years of doing work in education, I kind of started looking around and seeing what else I could dedicate my time and energy to. And I came across the work being done by Lower Phelan Creek Project and Wakan TV Center. And I'm just so excited to be part of this work right now. So at this sacred site that we kind of just talked about, this is within a 27-acre nature sanctuary called Bruce Vento Nature Sanctuary in the city of St. Paul. It is right below the bluffs from Indian Mounds Regional Park. And in the video, I talked both about Wakan TV cave site and the burial mounds, almost interchangeably or a little bit like they're one site, because in a Dakota perspective, they are really one place and connected spiritually in that way. So, you know, I came into the work and there's this concept for building this cultural and environmental interpretive center, which is going to be really a unique project, one of its kind, to talk about the environment and the geology of the site from an indigenous perspective, and also the cultural history of the site, again, from an authentic Dakota voice. And so I'm incredibly honored to be part of this work. It's been a long day, so I kind of feel like I'm jumping around a little bit and maybe not hitting all the points, but this center is going to be about 9,000 square feet. It's going to be within Bruce Vento Nature Sanctuary in St. Paul. And we're looking or expecting to break ground here in the spring of 2021 and be open to the public in the spring of 2022. We just received a second round of bonding from the state legislature. And so we've raised about $6.4 million against our total $7.7 million capital campaign right now. So that's kind of where the project's at. We're working in schematic design, and we're about to move into working on our interpretive planning and our program development for the programs that we're going to offer. So I'm here to answer any questions, Kate and I, and I'm really glad to be here tonight.
Great. So thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. Great to hear about the developing plans at Wakan TV Center. That's very exciting. Can you say a little bit, just to start off our questions, how unique is it for there to be an interpretive center devoted to interpreting Dakota or indigenous culture and history here in this region?
Yeah, well, I think that it's definitely something new. Shakopee Metawakan Sioux community just opened their Hochokatati cultural center this past year, and that is an amazing project, an amazing center, offering similar types of heritage programs, really focused and centered around the story of the Shakopee tribe specifically. There are other, centers and programs that offer indigenous perspectives. There's the Mille Lacs Trading Post that does really good programs and work. Kate works for the Minnesota Historical Society and is in charge of the American Indian initiatives, and they are doing just some amazing and incredible work since they've put these positions in place and since Kate's been there, honestly. So it's incredible the types of things that are happening. But I think that this will be a really unique project in that it's in the urban core. So, typically if you're going to go to American Indian Cultural Center that's run and administered, I guess, operated from an American Indian perspective, it's going to be on tribal land and run by a tribe. This is not the case with Wakan TV Center. We're a Native-led nonprofit organization partnering with the city of St. Paul to operate this center. So it's unique in that way. We are partnering really closely with the Dakota communities in the state of Minnesota because we want to ensure that that we're working in partnership with the tribes and certainly not doing anything that detracts from the important work that the tribes are doing. So we're building our partnerships and our coalitions and developing our programs in ways that will uplift all of the work that's happening in these amazing different spaces around the Twin Cities. But I think Wakan TV Center, especially as a place-based center, interpreting that specific place, Wakan Tipi, at the burial mounds, Kapoja Village, which is the closest village site there around Pig's Eye Lake. There's a lot of really important, significant history in the Twin Cities area, as Kate was mentioning, and also in particular, the east side of St. Paul has a lot of incredible stories that I think we need to do a little bit of work to reveal those stories to the larger general public, and some cultural healing work that is really kind of central to the goals for our center and our work, is to do some really incredible work to not only reconnect people with our cultural heritage through cultural arts and heritage programming, but also cultural healing.
Thank you. Kate, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to add really quick. I think that, you know, part of what everything Maggie just said is right on, and part of why I'm so interested in this space as a Dakota person from a tribe in South Dakota is, you know, as Dakota people in our home territories, we don't always have representation here. And so we have to represent ourselves, our families, and our own home bases, and our own these places that are significant for us. And we have tribal historic preservation offices. We have, you know, tribes and the 4 Dakota tribal communities in Minnesota that are doing such amazing work. And I think what this site is really reflective of is the ability for us all to work together, really focus on a place that we all love.
Wonderful. I have another question, Kate. Maybe you would speak to this. You were talking about the importance of Bedote within Dakota culture, the confluence area of the Minnesota and the Mississippi rivers. And that is now a state park, Fort Snelling State Park. And one of the questions that's been submitted is, would you suggest a name change for the park?
Well, you know, I can speak to that as a citizen, not as a representative of the Minnesota Historical Society, but as a private citizen and as somebody who's worked around name reclamation. My family worked around the reclamation of Panorama in Minneapolis. At the Minnesota Historical Society, there was talk about including the word Bedote into the signage for Fort Snelling, where the actual military diamond is. And there's a whole story with that, but essentially the word Bedote was added on signage to describe the place, and there was a lot of political backlash about that. When you're looking at the actual naming of the space, the larger area of the state park, that encompasses more of Bedote than any you know, a military fort would. You know, that military diamond is not Bedote. The Bedote is where the rivers come together. It's a descriptive. There are Bedotes all over the place, all over the world. But this particular area is known as Bedote for us, where these rivers come together and have a significant meaning. And again, our language is so visual. And so a lot of our names describe a place, they either describe how to get there or what it looks like. It's very descriptive. And so, you know, what I can say is that I am all for Dakota name restorations of spaces and of the acknowledgement of our language. We need that. Our spaces need it, and we need it as a people to connect with our lands and to more freely speak our language everywhere. And you know, I think that would be great to see. I'm all for Dakota language being everywhere.
Okay, great. Another question, either one of you. We're getting a lot of questions. Let's see. You talked about, I think, Kate, you mentioned the idea of the connection of the Dakota with the heavens, of coming from the heavens or from the stars. Is that something you could say more about?
Sure. So the Ocheti Shakowin, or the Seven Council Fires, which are the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota peoples, we're all related peoples, and we come from a larger group. From what I've been told is that we consider ourselves the Wichakbi Oyate, or the Star Nation. And so part of our creation stories, because we have more than one, but our creation is that we come from the sky, and that's also where we return after we pass away. And we have very distinct stories about our relationship to that sky. And when I've heard about star knowledge from a lot of community members, it's really beautiful. There's so many stories. There's so many. It's interesting how, if you look at the overlapping of the sky to the landscape, and you can actually see some of those sacred spaces within the sky, within the stars, because they mirror each other. And there's this mirroring that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And there are stories with all of these teachings that are continued to be told. Sometimes they weren't told through certain generations, and we're trying to remember these stories today and trying to pass these stories on today. So that connection to the stars for us is very close. We literally are made of the stars.
Wonderful. A couple of people are asking about resources to share with students. One question specifically relates to what you're just talking about star knowledge, but then also more generally, cultural resources that are good written resources, recognizing that oral traditions are very important in Dakota culture. Are there recommendations you can make? And if you have a couple of thoughts now, we could maybe even follow up with a list of suggestions as something we could send to folks. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a ton of resources out there. Maggie can speak to some resources too. There are one book that I recommend a lot is Minnesota Makoche, The Land of the Dakota, by Gwen Westerman and Bruce White. That's an excellent resource that talks about our longer connection to this land before 1862 in particular, to show the ways in which our people have such a longer 10,000 years of history connected to this land. And that's Minnesota Makoche, The Land of the Dakota, and that's by the Minnesota Historical Study Press. And there's also a ton of great resources that are coming out from communities, from tribal colleges. There's some information out there about star knowledge, and I don't know whether it'd be helpful to provide some resources that could be sent out. The Minnesota Historical Society, we have pages with resources on them too. We had an exhibit called Our Home Native Minnesota that opened up, and we have a lot of resources linked to that exhibit as well, where we can share some of that information. And there's some star knowledge information in there as well.
Great.
Yeah, and the only thing that I will add to that is I know there's an event that's coming up here in November for Native American Heritage Month, and I'm not exactly sure where folks could find the information other than our newsletter, to be honest, because it went out on the Minnesota Indian listserv, which is a listserv for Native people in Minnesota. And but I haven't seen a link anywhere else. I'm not really sure. But I know it's being hosted by Dakota Iapi Okotakichie and the Minnesota Indian Education Association. And so, but it's a Native Sky Watchers event, and there's going to be, it's coming up here in November. There's going to be a lot of different stories, but we have a link to more information about that in our newsletter. So if anybody wants to sign up for our newsletter at lowerphalenCreek.org. You can get that information along with, we're planning actually a storytelling event for winter, which is our traditional time that we tell our stories in our community. And we have that planning happening now for an event in February where we're specifically going to be focusing on star stories. So if you follow us, that would be a good way to find out about those two events. And, you know, winter is a great time for storytelling in our community. I know that the Minneapolis Community and Technical College usually hosts a storytelling event in the winter. A lot of colleges like the University of Minnesota and others will, Augsburg also will host storytelling events in the winter.
Great.
The
And we're going to
local newspaper announces a lot of these events throughout the year as well. So it's sort of a community newspaper called The Circle, and so you can check out their events online as well. They oftentimes will promote a lot of these storytellings that are going on in our community as well.
Wonderful. And we're going to post the web address for the Lower Phelan Creek project and Wakan TV at the end of our session here. So folks will be able to follow up with you there. I think we're going to move on a little bit, and I'm going to share just a little bit of how we're going to use the resources that we've begun creating with you within our broader educational work. And then we're going to return for some follow-up question and answer after that. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen again here. And tell you a little bit about our approach to integrating this kind of content in a format that is used by schools around the country. That what you're seeing here is our what we call our flagship watershed education program called Waters to the Sea. This is something we've been doing for about almost 25 years or so. It's evolved over time. Basically, this is a learning experience that takes a very multidisciplinary look at a watershed region. What you're seeing right now is the main menu screen. There are tabs across the top. And this is the story of the Mississippi River's journey from the headwaters to the Gulf of Mexico. And the map is going to pop up. There's a very rich interactive map dimension to this. So a map that shows the Mississippi corridor with hotspots, place-based stories located throughout this journey down the river. So it's a virtual journey that really explores these different topics, subject areas that you can see across the top of the screen. And within this Waters to the Sea program, we've been working closely with the National Park Service here in the Twin Cities to produce a special focused learning experience on the Bedote area, the area in the Twin Cities here that the Mississippi River passes through. So we are going to be creating a special module, a learning module, working with Maggie and Kate and others in the Dakota community that is going to be integrated into this experience. And this is a preview of what it's going to look like. So we're calling this the confluence of cultures, and really looking at the idea of how the Bedote area, where the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers come together, is a sacred and important site for the Dakota, and has been a focal point of history in the region in many, many ways. So within this module, we're going to include the video that we saw with Kate, Minnesota, Dakota Sacred Waters. That's this link right here. We'll have an introductory video from an interpretive naturalist with Fort Snelling State Park. We're going to have a history timeline that walks through how different cultural groups have interacted with this area. And then the main interactive is going to be linked here. And what you can see here is a Dakota place name map of the Twin Cities region. And we're going to be embedding this map with hotspots that will tell stories about these places. So the video that we saw with Maggie about Wakan TV will be played here. And that is the location of Wakan TV and the Indian Mounds Park together there. This is a work in progress. So this is what we're building right now, incorporating this content. And I'm going to share one other video that actually speaks to a number of the questions that have been asked so far. And this addresses the issues and interest in star knowledge. And this is a short video produced by Jim Rock.
Hamitaka api, chandewa shtea na pech yusa pido, ochete shakoing oyate himataha, wamdi hayetu imaki apido, damakota, sisituan, Dakota himata. Hello my relatives, I speak to you today with a glad heart, offer you my hand. My dad was Sisituan Dakota of the 7 Starfire Nations, ochete shakoing oyate. My name is Jim Rock in English. Wamdi Hayetu, Dakota ya. I was born at Imanija Ska Ed Himachare. I was born at St. Paul, at a near place called Wakan TV, the cave in which we have the drawings that tell something of our cosmic origins. So what I do is in a planetarium. I was, trained in Western science, but always kept our own ways of thinking here, and the two legs have really come together well in that the word nucleosynthesis, it just means that atoms are made in stars. And we've always said we come from the stars, and to the stars we return. We come from the earth, and to the earth we return. The iron in our blood, the carbon in our body had to come from a sun before this sun. So we're recycled stardust. Star stuff are us, I like to say. The Milky Way is like a river, not just any river, but Hahawakpa or Wakpatanka, Wakpahaska, the big long river, the river of the waterfalls. We find burial mounds near rivers. It's very intentional. It's not random. Our elders, those that have passed on, deserve the highest place near water to go back up to the stars, a place of honor, by the water that flows. Chang, Changwakan, Wakachang, the sacred tree, Sundance tree. The cottonwood tree is filled with stars. That tree full of stars connects between sky and earth. Along rivers, it likes its feet wet, its roots. It's a bridge between the river down here with sparkling lights on it and the sparkling stars above. The Wanagi Tachanku, the spirit road. It's the road of spirits that we come from and go back to. And we need to be living in a good way so that we go back to that place we come from with integrity, with generosity.
So that just kind of whets your appetite as to what's coming here. We're very, very excited to be able to work on this project. It's an honor to really deepen our understanding and knowledge of these areas. And we're just thrilled to be able to work with Maggie and Kate and others like Jim Rock to be able to do this. I'm going to share one other, just very briefly, another media element we have in Waters to the Sea. We're working with Native Americans in other parts of the country. And one of our colleagues is a Homa Indian woman named Monique Verdun, who is an artist. And this is an interactive experience that we created working with her. And this is an interactive panorama. This is Monique inside of a dwelling, kind of a modern version of a traditional Homa dome-shaped dwelling structure with palmetto leaves as walls. And Monique is also a filmmaker and produced a very powerful PBS documentary about the history of her family's experience in the Mississippi Delta and their relationship with the lands and waters. And so within this house, within this dwelling she has built, which she uses as an installation where people are invited to come in and tell stories of their lives, and she telling stories of her life. We've embedded segments from her documentary, and her documentary follows the experience of her family, beginning with her grandmother, an amazing woman. This is her. She died just a few years ago at age, I believe it was 104. Had the pleasure of meeting her before she died, an extraordinary woman. So the story, Monique's family story really goes back several generations to her grandmother and her parents, and follows the experience of going through Hurricane Katrina, the impact of the BP oil spill, and it's a very, very powerful story. So when you click each of these icons, you get a portion of that video story playing. So this is the kind of interactive media that we are developing that will be, part of this larger initiative to honor these stories and make them available to students, teachers, and the general public to learn more. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I think we have time for a few more questions. And I think Tracy is going to be doing the MC for questions.
We are not going to be able to get to all of these questions, but we do have a few more. One is, what significance does the Mississippi River hold for the Dakota and Anishinaabe people? Just thinking about the river as a bigger framework.
Well, I can speak to that a little. The river, I think, Kate talked about this in her video as well, but served primarily as roads, I guess, or trails. That's how in this area we traveled from place to place, was by canoe and through the waterways. So that it was one, a big way that the Mississippi River was connected to through our communities and history. But in addition, water is held by Dakota people and Anishinaabe people as one of our first sacred medicines. And so caring for the water and protecting waterways and different ceremonies that involve praying for the water are things that we do both in Anishinaabe and Dakota communities. The Mississippi River actually is named the traditional name for the river from Ojibwe-Moan was, probably gonna mispronounce it because I'm more fluent with my Dakota language skills, but Mississippi. So the Mississippi River takes its name from the Ojibwe word for the river. Dakota people refer to the Mississippi River as either Wakantanka, which is the Great River, or I've also heard Wakpa, which is the River of Falls or waterfalls. So those are some of the ways that, or just some thoughts on the river and the ways that our communities think about the river. And Kate, I don't know if you want to elaborate or expand on that.
No, I think you had a perfect answer right there. I think that one of the things that I mentioned of it as sort of being like the veins of the earth. One thing that I often think about is how the river connects all of us and connects all of our sacred spaces to each other. And so it's a connector in a lot of ways. And not only the connector of the water that we see, but the water that we don't see that's underneath the earth or has been covered up, right? Like in with the Lower Fallon Creek project. And so, I think that realizing how important these spaces are for us is really reconnecting with the land and with these links that bring us all together.
I'm going to move to actually synthesizing a couple of questions that have come through about language, but I'll phrase it like this. Regarding language, how do you feel about non-Indigenous people attempting to learn Indigenous language? And I guess that is the question.
Well, I can say something quick here. Kate and I both are married to people who work in language revitalization. So our husbands both work at Dakota Learning Center, which is a Ojibwe and Dakota immersion school located in Minneapolis. And we at that school have a number of non-native teachers of our languages, and their contribution to the reclamation of our language and the renewal of bringing up these young ones with language skills is invaluable. So I feel like Dakota language is like any other language. This is my opinion, and I know other people may differ in opinions, but I feel like our language is there for anybody to learn and to speak, and even more so because we are in this situation where our language is endangered. And I think that it's really important, if you are going to be a non-native person learning the language, to also consider learning more deeply about being an ally to Indigenous communities, because I think sometimes that can be a tough spot for people to be in as a non-native person working in those spaces, and just learning more about how to be a good ally is something that could go a long way.
I would follow up. A question with that is, what might be one or two things that to be a good ally? I love that term. Are there some suggestions you could give right now that might be important frameworks to think about?
I think number one is to support Native-led efforts. That is incredibly important. Like Natives lead. We know our language, we know our culture, we know who we are, and we also know what we need. And we have the answers within ourselves and within our own communities. What Maggie mentioned before, we have so many. You hear me okay? No.
Can barely make it out, but
Yeah, there was some trouble with your audio there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, me and Kate have been kind of joking about this. My computer, I'm joining from my phone tonight because my laptop does not keep up with me by this point in the day. And unfortunately, this is how Kate's laptop likes to throw a tantrum at the end of the day with her late in the day Zoom meetings. So yeah, thanks. But what was the question again?
how can you be a good ally? What would be some things that you might consider?
Oh, sure.
And Kate had done some.
Yeah, so supporting Native-led efforts and listening to Native people, I think, is a really great way to support and be a good ally. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, I guess. But there's a lot of reasons why, as Native people, we do things in certain ways that, from an outside perspective, outside of our culture, people might not understand. And I think that just listening to Native people and following their lead and trying to be open to the process and the learning and the guidance that you receive from Native people can be really important. And I guess that's
good.
I'll leave it there.
I'm going to do one more question so we can honor our time and conclude this. But one of the early questions we had from Wendy was, how can people from the neighborhood nearby participate in and support the Wakan TP now and in the future? And I might expand that to say, how can anybody in this country help? But how can we support your efforts? I know you're both, employee and on the board, but that is a critical and wonderful opportunity in St. Paul.
Yeah, we have a lot of ways that people can connect with us. Definitely follow our work by liking us on Facebook and Instagram and signing up for our newsletter, because that's where you can get the most up-to-date information about opportunities to volunteer, different fundraising campaigns we might have throughout the year where we need support for different projects. And so that's a good way to connect there. This year, we actually hired a new environmental stewardship program manager full-time. So we're a small organization. I have been the only full-time staff member until this year when we hired this program manager. So his part of his work is building out our volunteer program to help connect folks who want to volunteer with us and want to contribute to our work, have more of a succinct, I guess, way to do that. So that's something that's coming up in the future, but we do have volunteer opportunities. And this year, it's been a little bit different, looks a little different because of COVID and the restrictions that we've had, but we have been able to do some of our projects and programs due to the nature of our work being outdoors. And that's one of the more safe ways to gather in smaller groups is outside. So we've been able to do some invasive species removal, some native plantings, trash cleanups and things like that at the sanctuary, which is really always fills me up every time I'm down there, you know, whether it's for a walk with my family or for an event like doing some restoration. It just makes me feel really good to be in that place and to be doing something that I feel is helping enhance the space and the sanctuary. So I would definitely encourage anybody to connect with us through our newsletter and social media.
Thank you very much, Kate and Maggie. John, I'll let you wrap this up and people can keep on with their snowy night here in Minnesota.
And wherever you are. So I've just opened up a screen here with some follow-up links. We can send these to you as a follow-up email as well, so you don't have to necessarily note them. But website information about our center and about Lower Phelan Creek.org. And we are going to be hosting these webinars on a monthly basis. So we have a website where you can check and see what's coming up. And finally, if there are any of you interested who are participating tonight in continuing education credit, there's a form at the address there. So we'll be sending that to you. And I guess just to wrap it up, I would just say, again, thank you so much, Maggie and Kate, for your willingness to share stories with us, for deepening our understanding of this great river that flows through our Twin Cities and across our country, and giving us insights and things to think about. And for everybody who's joined us, thank you so much for taking time. And we will look forward to hopefully seeing you back soon. We have a webinar coming up in December that will focus on outdoor education and virtual education pedagogy. And that should be exciting. And then we're going to take a trip to the Mississippi Delta in January, working with some of our partners there. So with that, I will just say thank you again, and be well, everybody be safe, and thanks for being with us.